Chris Reeve, Nick Strider, Rick Hinderer, the Sapenza, well, the SNG, but this is an SMF, and then of course the XM18. They're all considered these are considered the Holy Trinity of knives, have been for years. Are they still considered the Holy Trinity? Maybe that's a different subject, different discussion for another time, but they're all definitely iconic. Well, certainly these three makers and these three models. I mean, generally, yes, the SNG would not be, or would be the one you consider, not the SMF, but fairly interchangeable in that category, I would think. But let's talk about some knives that we consider to be iconic knives. Of course, these three here, they've been around for a long time. They have a lot of qualities that people are looking for. And but also, what makes a knife iconic? Is it just being around for a long time? Is it the fact that it's been widely adopted for use and considered, some of the best production or the best knives out there? Is that what makes it iconic? I've got a few other knives here on the table that I wanted to kind of go over and discuss maybe the thoughts on why I think they're iconic, and go over that. And maybe you can just comment below and see what you think of my choices, but also what you think some knives that you may have or you consider to be iconic knives. So go ahead and if you do like this content, I certainly would appreciate a like. And if you haven't done so already, hitting that subscribe button, maybe turning on those alerts, I'd appreciate that too. So we'll make some room for some other knives that I would consider to be iconic besides those three. Certainly, I think you could put the Buck 110. It's been around forever. It has been widely adopted for years and years and years. Buck designed this knife to be basically a folding hunting knife, one that could be in the pocket or worn on the belt, as opposed to just having a fixed blade. It has just been around forever. They've got several iterations out now in modern steels. This, of course, is good old 420 HC. The brass bolsters and the ebony wood handles. So this is kind of its classic iteration. Of course, I have the thumb stud on there, which is not native to the model, but something that I've added on there. So, I mean, the Buck 110, I think, certainly fits the category of iconic knives. Let's go back in time a little bit again, stay in the classic theme. The ZT 0300 series. This is the 0303, as you can see right there, S30V steel. Long discontinued by ZT. Widely considered, I believe I think the 0200 series of knives was their first foray into folders back in the early 2000s. And then, of course, the 0300 came out. Ken Onion design. ZT produced. I guess Strider is credited with this too. Having some saying that. I'm not 100% sure. It's possible that it could just be this jimping on the backspacer, or the backspacer, the back of the handle right there. Is the Strider influence, along with this jimping right here. Potentially, you could say the lock bar stabilizer right there, but really when you get into that, or the over travel stop, that's going to be a Hinderer. I believe that's a Hinderer invention right there. So I'm not 100% sure what Strider had in this. If I had to guess, I would say the things that are most similar to Strider would be the clip, of course, the jimping on the back of the blade, and then of course the jimping right there, but that would probably be about it. But in any case, this is one of those knives that ZT has kind of kept around with the 0308 and at least the spiritual successor to the 0300 series of knives. But in my opinion, we're not looking anywhere near as cool. Just the cool factor of the in this case, the 0303. This one has been de-assisted. If you want to de-assist these, you can take the torsion bar out, but these do not have a detent hole pre-drilled in the blade. So in order to really make it effective, you would need to, either do it yourself or have somebody drill a detent hole in the blade for you. So we'll go ahead and put that one there. Let's move on to right here, Ontario Rat 1. I would certainly consider the Rat 1, Rat 2 models iconic. This has been, for a long time, this was the, quote-unquote budget knife to own. Sub $50 for a long time. It was really probably one of the best knives that you could get for under $100 where you get the bang for your buck, especially when they use the D2 steel. This is just a workhorse of a knife. You don't have to feel bad, you know, doing dirty jobs with it, beating on it, whatever you want to do. You know, they're still producing these. I believe they're all made in China now. They're not made in Taiwan, which is kind of a shame, but, you know, this is kind of the way things go at times. But I would certainly say that this knife could be considered iconic without any question. You know, that Ontario Rat 1. Let's go with Spyderco. I would say this is, of course, the Endura. This is in ZDP 189 in the British Racing Green. You could easily say the Delica would also be iconic as well. These are knives that have just been around for a while. Everybody knows them. A lot of people use them. You know, the Delica especially more than the Endura. But, you know, this is a knife that it's just been around and it gets used all the time. Everybody loves this knife for the most part. You know, either this or the Delica. Now, they do have the Endura now, which is kind of in between this. This is, you know, over basically a 4-inch blade, 3.75-inch blade or thereabouts. And the Delica is like a 3.25-inch blade, I think. And so the Endura kind of splits the difference between the Endura and the Delica. I don't think it's reached icon status yet, but, you know, at the same time, it's in the same family of knives. So I would certainly consider the Spyderco Endura / Delica to be iconic knives. Moving on, sticking with Spyderco, here's the PM2. I guess you could say the entire military line. Certainly the classic Millie would be iconic. And, you know, just based on the fact that how popular this knife is, the Para 2, I think you could call this knife iconic as well. It's been around for years. It's got updates over the years with their CQI, their constant quality improvement that Spyderco has. Constant just sprint runs. They've probably done more sprint runs of this knife right here than any other model. Likely, you know, don't quote me on that. Do your own research, but you know, they've probably done more than any other knife in their lineup. The compression lock, which now the new Military 2 has. You know, it's just, everybody knows this knife. Everybody pretty much agrees that it's a great knife. And certainly I would think is in icon status at this point. We're going to reach back in the way back machine to another now long discontinued knife, Almar Knives. His impact on the cutlery industry should not be ignored. A lot of people aren't really familiar with Almar. I do have an old video on this knife, probably a year and a half or so ago. I did a video on this knife. But yeah, this is the SERE 2000, the SERE, which is survive, evade. I can't exactly remember what SERE stands for at this point, but it is an acronym. Almar was a U.S. Special Forces member, and he did a lot of training for both domestic troops and, you know, foreign allies. And then he had, you know, his cutlery company where he did customs, and then he did production company producing knives in Japan. And then, you know, unfortunately, after his passing and then his wife's passing, the name was sold, but the production has moved over to China, and of course the quality has suffered along with that. But another great company, but that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. But yeah, I would certainly consider Almar and the SERE series of knives to be iconic. Gonna go in a little bit of beast mode here. The Medford TFF. Now, ideally, I would consider the Praetorian to be more iconic than the TFF, and I do have one, but it is in my desk at work, and obviously I don't have access to it right now, but I wanted to go ahead and shoot this video while I had the inspiration fresh. I do believe the TFF is older by a couple years than the Praetorian. The original TFF one looked different. It was pretty much all belly. It was almost like, truly looked like a spade, where it was almost all belly right there. But yeah, this configuration right here is, of course, the current version. This is S90V, as indicated by the 9, so that also means it's DLT exclusive. Titanium handles. This S90V blade, of course. They do most of their blades. It's going to be, nowadays, S45VN. I don't know if they're still doing their CPMT2, but they'll do 3V, and then, you know, maybe a couple of others as well. S35VN is what they used historically as well. This one is, of course, the TFF1, so it's going to have I believe 0.125 inch scales and then a 0.187 inch blade. There's 3 different versions where the TFFH is the hybrid, and the blade stock and the scales are all the same thickness. And then the Fat Daddy, where you have the 0.26 blade, and then I think the 0.187 scales. So that one's just bigger and beefier all around. I have owned all 3, and this one actually ends up being my favorite, which kind of surprises me because I usually like the H models, but this one is, my favorite. So Praetorian, I think, is slightly more iconic, but I certainly think this brand, Medford Knives, deserves some consideration. I'm kind of running out of room, but is what it is. Grimm Norman. It's been around for well over 10 years. I believe this knife, at this point, is certainly considered iconic. It was the first knife that took that drop shut action, perfected it, made it something that was pretty much jaw-dropping. Now, every knife nowadays, Chinese companies and everybody else can make a knife that is drop shut. Nobody does it quite like Grimm's. I think there are some other small batch production companies that have kind of caught up, so to speak. I would say Holt is one of those companies. Koenig is one of those companies as well. But Grimm's did it first. You can argue whether or not they did it best. But the Norseman, with that super unique blade style, people have different names for it. Won't get into that here. But a super unique blade, CNC mill blade, everything done is just precision, precision, precision. Grimm Norman, absolutely, in my book, hits icon status. Last one I'm going to do, Rockstead. Rockstead is just another one of those knives that is super high-end production, individually made in Japan, hand-ground blades, full convex edges, mirror polish. This one is DLC, but it is still just absolutely mirror polished. Let's see if I can clean it off. Just using my shirt just a little bit here. Of course, it's going to be a fingerprint magnet. But, one of my followers on Instagram said, yeah, you can put your makeup on with that blade. And it's absolutely true. So these come in a couple of different varieties of steel. This is YXR7. And it is DLC coated. And then they also have ZDP 189. These are all heat treated, custom heat treat protocols on these. I believe this one is 64.7, something like that. They're all also individually hardness tested, as you can see by that little dimple right there. These are definitely knives that I would consider iconic at this point, whether you're talking about the Shin or the Hygo 2. Hygo 2, whichever one you prefer. This, of course, is the current iteration. Absolutely icon status at this point. Let's see. Anything else? Nope, that's going to do it for me today. We're going to put these other 3, the original 3. Maybe I'll just kind of move that. Here, I know what I'll do. We'll do that right there. Kind of get everything basically in shot as best we can. Oops. Put good old Mick Strider right there. And then Chris Reeve. Iconic knives. Let me know in the comments what you think. What would some of your, what do you think of my choices? Am I totally off the mark? What would you add? What knives do you consider to be iconic that I did not include in this video? Go ahead and put your comment there. Give me a follow on Instagram at Chuck_Nunface. Certainly do appreciate you subscribing to the channel and leaving those comments and setting your alerts and everything else. And I look forward to reading your comments in the coming days and seeing what you think. Peace.